again with another episode of Garden Side Chats. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to continue talking a little bit about herbs. If you've been following these, you might recall that we talked about herbs maybe a couple weeks back, something like that. I have got some herbs growing in some pots in my front yard, but today we wanted to talk about how to propagate some herbs that you might see in a friend's garden or somewhere else if you don't want to purchase the plants yourself. So we're going to do just a short little demonstration on how to propagate some really simple herbs and how to take care of them, and then maybe touch base again on just growing herbs in general. So thanks for joining us today. So let's get started. So I've got a couple materials here. Firstly, I'm going to use my scissors. So we're going to head on over to a little patch of oregano that I found in my backyard. That's pretty much just in some like irises and also in some grass. So I'm going to take some snippets, talk about where you take your cuttings, and then we're going to also go get some mint that I found in my yard as well. All right, let's roll. So a lot of herbs are really easy to propagate from cuttings. You just have to know where to cut them. So that's what we're going to go over today. Also, doing it from cuttings is a really good idea because some herbs take forever to grow from seed. So, for example, like lavender will take a long, long time to try to grow lavender from a seed to get to a plant where you can harvest some of the lavender or get the flowers from it. Some seed is not what we call true. So sometimes for some plants, the only like true way you can get another plant from that is by propagating it, by taking a chunk off that plant and putting it somewhere else. A lot of perennial herbs are grown through propagation, be it plant division, taking like cuttings like what we're doing today, or air layering. There's a whole world of plant propagation that you can do for herbs, but also a whole array of other plants. For annual herbs like your cilantro, fennel, dill, even basil, all of that stuff can be planted from seed. Just very, very easily. So for the annual herbs, I would suggest maybe just doing from seed. One exception would be basil. Basil grows into a nice compact plant, and if you wanted throughout the season, you decide you want more basil, you could take a cutting off of your basil plant with the things you learned today and propagate some more basil. But that said, propagating herbs from plant cuttings is very easy. Pretty cheap way to expand your herb collection. You can buy herb plants from nurseries, hardware stores, grocery stores right now. But if you knew a couple small tricks, you'll be able to grow them essentially for free at home. So let's get going. So you'll need some scissors or a sharp knife or a really sharp pair of pruners, maybe. So let's pan down. Okay. So I just moved into this house and I'm learning a lot about the yard. One of the things I learned is that we have a patch of oregano growing kind of in some irises, kind of where some honeysuckle that I'm cutting down is. I was kind of surprised. I was excited to see it. I do have oregano growing in one of the pots in my front yard, but I like oregano a lot, so I kind of want to expand my oregano production. But I know that I'm not going to take care of the oregano that's in this situation. There's grass, there's some more honeysuckle, there's irises. It's just kind of cluttered. So I'm going to take a couple cuttings and propagate them. And then once the cuttings are rooted, I'm going to plant them wherever I want them. Which I don't know where that is yet, but I will figure it out. So just like if you recall when we talked about harvesting and pruning, there's a couple places that are really important, have a lot of activity in a broadleaf plant, and oregano is a broadleaf plant. And that kind of hot spot for activity is right where the leaves kind of sprout off from one of the stems. So right here is there's a lot of like growth cells happening. So they're making leaves now, but if you prune this and dip this in some water or just plant this in a pot, this is where roots will start growing. So if you cut it right in the middle of the the stem margin in between the sets of leaves, that's not where roots are going to come from. Roots are going to come from right around where the leaves are sprouting off. So it's a important, that's an important consideration to know. So I'm going to just snip the stem just below those leaves. And I'm going to take multiple cuttings because you just never know what's going to take and what doesn't take. I'm going to kind of look around for maybe some longer ones. The oregano's just breaking dormancy right now, so it's pretty short. Here's a good one. So here's a good one. So I'm gonna cut it right here. And what I'm doing is I'm just cutting it right now. I'm gonna deal with the rest of it later. So I've got two. Let's try to do one right here. Leaf right there. So this one's got a lot of leaves. I'm gonna do under these leaves, like that. And let's go for one more. Here we go. Here's a good one. This one's leggy. So this one has a lot of margin in between the leaves, and that's because there's a lot of other plant life growing around, so it's competing for sunlight. But there is a couple leaves down here, so I'm going to snip those just below those. See? Okay, so I've got four. Let's go over to our mint and then try to do that quickly, and then we will plant these. So I've got two different ways that we're going to propagate them today. One is in some potting mix, and then one is in just a little vase of water. Both systems have worked better. I think I might prefer the water method just because you can see what's happening a little better. Okay, so this is up close to my house. We've kind of got a lot going on here. Here's some mint that I want to grow as well.
Can you scoot to the side?
So just like the oregano, you'll see that the mint has some stem without any leaves growing, and then little clusters of leaves growing opposite of each other. So just like the oregano, it's just like a pattern. You just want to clip right under where the leaf are sprouting out. So just like that. Here's another one. Boom. Okay. Let's just do those. I can smell it already. And then we'll go over and talk about propagating. Try to keep the herbs in my shade here. So I've got my little vase of water, and then I've also got...
Can we see where they've been cut?
Yeah. So here's
Can you get out of it? You're making the shadow.
So here, this is the oregano, this is the mint. You can see that they were both cut just below where the leaves are sprouting off of the stem. Okay, and you want to work quickly. So you cut them, it's warm outside, it's sunny. You don't want them to wilt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the lowest set of leaves off on my mint, just like that. And then I've already got this little jar of water. I'm just going to stick that in the water, and actually I'm going to pull these leaves off. It's important to pull the leaves off that are going to be submerged, leaves off of the stem, because you don't want the leaves to be submerged because they're just going to rot. And you want to put it in the water as fast as you can, because when you cut it, a bubble of air gets sucked into the main part of the stem, and that bubble of air will always kind of make it hard for the plant to fully regain, like it being what we call turgid, like full of water. So what they do in the cut flower industry is they'll cut for long-lasting bouquets. They'll cut something and then bring it in, fill up a sink of water, submerge the stem and then cut it underwater. So instead of having an air bubble suck up inside the stem, it will have some water sucked up inside the stem. I have had success rooting herbs, especially mint, without having to cut it sometime underwater. So I don't know if I'm going to do that today, but it could be a good trick. I'm going to do the same thing with the oregano. I'm just going to pull the lower leaves off of the oregano, and this is where the leaves are. That in there. There we go. Okay, so I got some potting mix and some, little potting trays or potting cells. Okay. It's a little bit cool because it was outside, but I think it'll be fine. Alright, so I just filled up the little cells. I used my fingers to make little holes in it. Just like with the vase of water, I'm going to pluck the leaves off. Just like you don't want to submerge the leaves in water, you don't want to submerge the leaves in the potting mix. And then just kind of stick it directly in the hole right away. And using your fingers kind of tap the potting mix back in place all around the stem, kind of nice and firmly. You don't want your cuttings to be too long. I would say these might be on the kind of big side, because the more leaves and the more plant matter you've got, the more the plant has to work at keeping all of those full of water and not keeping them from wilting. So it just makes the plant work a little bit more. So you definitely want to have smaller cuttings, like maybe couple inches or shorter as far as your propagation cuttings. Alright, so I just had to top that one off a little bit. Alright, so now we're just working on the oregano, since I took more cuttings of the oregano than the mint. Same thing, classic, just pulling off the leaves. This would go with bouquets too. If you just want a bouquet, a lot of people use herbs in bouquets, or at least I do. And so just you want to kind of keep the bottom portion of the stem clean so that there's not leaves getting all up in each other's business and crowding and starting to cutting down air circulation, starting to mold and stuff, because that's just going to reduce the longevity of the whole bouquet. Now this one's got a lot of leaves, so I'm probably going to cut off these lower three clusters of leaves and stick that whole part of the stem down into the potting mix. Okay. So a lot of people, when they do propagating, they'll use a rooting hormone. That will definitely make it easier and more likely to succeed, but it's not necessary. There's some things that are easier to root than others. Mint is one of the easiest things. Oregano is a little bit more challenging. Basil is really easy to root. So there's some things that definitely would appreciate it, but not 100% necessary. Okay, so just like anytime I plant anything, I'd want to water it. I don't have my watering can with me, but that's what I'm going to do right after this is over. And then I'm going to bring them inside out of the sun, because the sun's, although it's not very warm today, the sun is kind of, it's intense, and so these plants just went through kind of a pretty intense life event. So I want to get them out of the sun and just kind of make sure the vase is always full of water. Within several days, you should see the roots starting to grow where the nodes are, and the nodes are where the leaf, so we're growing, and now the roots are going to start growing there. It's going to be harder to monitor success with the potted herbs, but if they're not wilting and looking nice and plump, you probably can assume that they're doing well. And just like all the other starts in your house, you just keep them watered on a, however frequently they're telling you that they need to be watered. I'd probably water these every other day, or at least check on them daily and assume to water them every other day. And then maybe in about 2 months, month and a half, maybe I'll be able to plant them somewhere else.
Why would you propagate them in dirt versus in water?
That's a good question. The question is, why would you propagate this way versus this way? So I have heard that if you propagate them in water, the roots are a little more brittle than if you propagate them and put them in potting mix. So when you pull these out, when they're rooted and you pull them out of the vase of water and plant them in your garden or in a container, the roots might be less robust than they are in this environment. However, I have had success doing that. I will say that when you root them in a vase of water, the roots are kind of floating in